Hello, friends! Welcome to episode 133 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level, I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
And I'm super excited.
I know.
I'm
You
are
gushing hard.
all about it. One of my favorite book series, one of Sean's favorite book series, Wheel of Time, is getting made into a TV series. It premieres this Friday on Amazon Prime, and I'm so jazzed about it. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so good.
Yeah, and honestly, I've been kind of gushing about Arcane, the League of Legends series, because I've been loving all the cinema up to this point, and I've always felt like this beautiful artwork, this beautiful storytelling, wonderful music is kind of going to waste. And, it's not waste. It's enjoyable still. But, there's so much there to play with. And seeing it now being portrayed in a full-on series, a story, is wonderful to see. And I'm not surprised that they grabbed Jinx. I'm not surprised in the least.
Yeah.
A very, very recognizable, lovable character. And, honestly, it wraps the story really well.
I didn't get into League of Legends, but I did play my fair share of Dota.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing where it almost felt like a waste where you had such great character backstories and all they were was just this 5v5 team fighting game.
Yep.
And
they could have been colored sprites with abilities and it would be no different.
Exactly.
It was so separated. But I think that for me it was more enjoyable than the game. I never really enjoyed League of Legends as a whole.
Sure.
And I could never get into playing it online with anybody other than friends.
Well, you're in good company. There are millions of people out there who also hate League of Legends. So
I don't hate it, but I understand the challenges involved in the system. But it's wonderful to see how easy it is. And I shouldn't say easy. I take that back. I apologize to the producers and the creators and everything like that. I should not have said that. I see how wonderful it is that these streaming services have been able to invest in these types of endeavors and create amazing content that we wouldn't have seen before, practically indie content. And because they need content, and then jewels like this just pour out.
Oh, sure.
When they hit the right vein. And honestly, they're listening really well to their audiences to get that. And we're seeing that. We're seeing, people like, groups like Disney and Amazon and Paramount and Netflix finding and mining these things that they know are wanted.
Yeah.
And then doing, in some cases, the best thing, which is to hand them money and walk away. Just give this to us later. We need it by this time. Otherwise, this is your baby, not ours. We're going to step. We're not going to step into this and bother it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they've done that, and it's worked out exceptionally well. And I've been happy to see some of it.
It's great. Honestly, it's a great time for media and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
And I hope this continues. I am certain there's probably 40 podcasts that talk about this topic and go and dissect these things into detail. But for storytelling purposes, it's a wonderful time. It really is.
Yeah.
We have a lot of mixed media, and it's beautiful to see.
Coming up in February, the Critical Role show is going to be coming out on Amazon Prime as well.
I know.
And my brain keeps reeling around what exactly that means. Obviously I'm a fan of the show and stuff like that.
Yeah, no doubt.
But some dudes had a D&D game, and now that's a multi-million-dollar cartoon project on a major network.
I know. And I guess what's even better about it is they're all voice actors.
Yeah.
So it fits really well.
I guess who's going to be voicing the characters,
Yeah, clearly that. But somebody asked an open question when I was surfing through some things, and they said, who's going to do the biography on this in 20 years? 30 years from now. Because at some point it's going to end.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah.
And then 10, 15 years after that, 10 years after that, there's going to be a revival of some level. And, they might do some kind of now this kind of a thing. But who's going to do the documentary later about this?
I don't know.
Who's going to be our our new a new voice to do those pieces.
The Ken Burns 23-part Critical Role retrospective.
Yeah, because it's going to be huge. To explain the story, it's going to be huge, but so many people know it, you know? But how much will it fade? How much will it be just a figment in time? You know?
Crazy to think. It's
Yeah.
crazy to think that it even is a thing in time to
Today.
begin with. Yeah. But anyways, we have now that we've got the rambles out. We've got a topic today, and we're going to talk about player expectations. And it's one of those kind of strange things that kind of sits in between, like, I don't know. It's a little difficult to define for me because it's not quite as solid as like anything you can adjudicate with game mechanics.
Well, we already know that this is going to be an NC-17 episode based upon some of the content that we're going to be discussing at some point.
It's not NC-17.
So I'm just going to say this is going to be challenging as hell to discuss.
It's not NC-17.
In the sense of where it fits. So what we're talking about tonight is player expectations. And when we say that, it is a very broad topic. It covers so much ground, not just what it sounds like. The concept of player expectations is like, what do your players expect to get out of the game is just one part of that.
Right. And
how they are playing the game and where they fit into it is all even more of that.
And also what is covered and meant by expectations is that deal with what they're expecting to happen in game, what they're expecting from an out of game standpoint, you know.
Yeah. And how to present that in any meaningful way that describes it well enough to get everybody on the same page.
Yes. So when we're talking about player expectations, it's not really stuff like what monsters are we going to fight or who is the big bad evil guy. It's not. Those are more like character expectations or anticipations about the story, but they're not. I wouldn't really call those player expectations.
No.
We're talking more of like, is this a horror game or a lighthearted adventure? You know, will we explore certain themes that might be sensitive? You know, are we going to deal with adult things?
Yeah. Is it going to be long? Is it going to be short? And those are relative terms, keep in mind. I mean, one thing is to be said is that if you're at a convention and you're sitting down to play a game, you get an expectation wrapped up of is there multiple episodes? Are you playing every day? Or is this I'm sitting down for 4 hours and that is the session. That's it. So it's going to be fast and furious and quick. And it's not going to be as complete as any other story, but it's still going to feel good.
Yeah.
You know?
And also other things of like, you know, how often are we going to level up? Like that's a player expectation. I wrote that one down specifically because that one was not met for me in a game that I left. You know, is this more of an RP style game or more of a hack and slash? That's a pretty common expectation.
I think that is more today than it ever has been.
Oh yeah,
Way
especially
more today.
with the given the options that are on the market now for different RP games. So why is this sort of thing really important to discuss? I mean, you figure you're all going to sit down to a tabletop game. You know, you're all friends at the table. Okay, just play some D&D. What does it matter? Why do you have to worry about managing player expectations?
Well, I think much like any tabletop game, regardless of if it's role-playing or not, I think there's an expectation. I can remember sitting down to play Carcassonne, which is a very simple game of laying tiles. And whether or not we wanted to play aggressively or not was actually a topic.
Yeah.
And we're talking about just a very simple tile game. You know, but that's an expectation. That's something in there, especially if you don't know the people around you. And I think that's the key to it is that when setting the stage for expectations, you're talking about working with people you know, working with people you don't know, working with people with different opinions, and setting that stage. And one of the things that I think you did, or that comes out of this, is that if it's not set, people can get kind of upset and hold that upset very close.
Oh yeah. I think in my experience at least, and I've got some managerial experience and such like that as well. Is because you find a lot of conflicts, a lot of bad emotions come out of mismanaged expectations. It's quite simply, somebody thought something was or was not going to happen, and those expectations were not met.
Mm-hmm.
Either the thing that they didn't think was going to happen did, the thing that they thought was going to happen may have happened differently than they expected,
Mm-hmm.
might not have happened enough, might have happened too much. One way or another, it didn't turn out how they thought it was going to be.
Right.
And it's not necessarily that the outcome itself was bad, but you'd be surprised how people will take it personally when something happens different from what they wanted to happen or what they thought was going to happen, you know?
Yeah. Or something that you set an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, someone else's assumptions is definitely something that they have to manage, especially if they talk it out and there was clearly never anything definition. It was something that they just made an assumption on.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing when you present something as one thing and it doesn't turn out that way and you never describe past why it changed. Case in point, movies do this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Trailers are not often what they come out to be. They've been better. I will say that it's gotten way better than it used to be.
For me, the best example
Okay.
of mismanaged expectations was the movie A Knight's Tale.
That's Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger,
Okay.
Alan Tudyk, and Rufus Sewell plays the bad guy.
I honestly forgot that Alan Tudyk was in that.
Uh-huh. And so I went back and I specifically watched the trailer earlier today.
Oh, Lord.
Just to refresh it in my mind. And now, keeping in mind, the movie does show a lot of scenes of jousting and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It shows a lot of very serious dialogue about how, I'm not a noble, I'm just a commoner. I can't joust. Well, no, screw that. I'm gonna joust.
Yeah.
And it shows some quippy dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you're hitting people with a pointy stick, and Alan Tudyk going, it's called a lance, hello.
Yeah.
And, it's a funny line.
Yeah.
So at least it's going to have some
pluckiness
plucky
to it.
dialogue to it, The trailer also featured the Stomp Stomp Clap from We Will Rock You.
Right.
Taken Care of Business
Mm-hmm.
by Huey Lewis, I think. Yeah?
No. Taking Care of Business was...
Taking Care of Business.
Yep.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Anyways, it featured that song, and it featured at least the guitar part from Dragula by Rob Zombie.
Right.
Now, that's not terribly uncommon for a trailer to use some sort of pop culture music.
Yeah.
For instance, like recently the movie Dune just came out, right?
Yeah.
The very first trailer for that had a really cool version of Eclipse by Pink Floyd playing over it.
Incredible.
And featured nowhere in the movie.
Nope. None whatsoever.
So, when you're watching a trailer about a jouster in medieval times with some plucky dialogue in it, you're just thinking, oh, it's a cute, plucky kind of comedy, but it's a dramedy about a commoner trying to play as a noble so he can joust. You get into the movie theater, and the opening credits are rolling, and they're showing these sweeping scenes of what you originally take to be a Renaissance fair. You originally take it to be a Renaissance fair because there are people hawking like food in the stands, and all the crowd is cheering, and Queen's "We Will Rock You" is going full blast.
Right.
This actually is the intro song, and it's the peasants actually doing the stomp, stomp, clap, stomp. And you're like, what is going on? Is this a Renaissance fair? Are they going to say, like, okay, and this is how it all, this is what it looks like modern day, but let's take you back to medieval times where it all started.
Right.
No, that's medieval times.
No.
It is chock full of pop culture references. There's a scene where they're all the nobles are dancing to Golden Years by David Bowie.
Oh, Lord.
Now, to make a long story slightly shorter.
Too late.
This is why people hated the movie. Because they looked at the trailer and they thought, oh, it's going to be a plucky dramedy about medieval jousting. And they got this movie that was chock full of pop culture references, completely off the realism scale.
Right.
A very good drama and a very good story. Yep. I will die on that hill.
Mm-hmm.
I love this movie. But you either love it or you hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you hate it, I would put $50 on the reason you hate this movie is because you walked into the theater expecting one thing and received another.
Yeah.
Not that the thing you received was bad, but the thing you received was not what you believed it to be from watching the trailer.
The sale pitch, if you will.
It was not the sales pitch.
Yeah, I kind of felt that when I went and saw Plunkett and McLean, which is another kind of plucky period piece, if you will.
Bachman Turner Overdrive. That's
Thank
the
you.
band. Thank you,
Thank
Knox.
And when I saw that movie, the trailer for it was kind of odd. But it wasn't what the movie was. But I had never seen the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
I just watched the movie because I heard it was very good. And so I had no taint on it. But looking back at the trailer, I'm like, this isn't the movie. Like this is a terrible short on what the movie actually is.
Yeah.
So it was a turn on that in my mind of like, I don't think this was sold right, and people didn't get to experience it properly because it didn't have a good sales pitch.
Yeah.
So this is where I think we really get mismanaged expectations.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
someone either presents it incorrectly or presents it as rote, and people are like, that's not what I thought this was going to be like at all, because I thought what you said was just kind of flash in the pan. You're really telling me that it's this serious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So we start setting our expectations in our session 0.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think even prior to that in some of our sales pitches.
Yeah,
groups,
I think so. Yeah, hey, I'm thinking about running a really super serious, Elder Scrolls themed role playing game.
Yeah,
we're going to use D&D 5th edition.
Yeah, or I'm running a Heroes game that's going to be on the high seas.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of buy that right there. That's a sales pitch.
Yeah, that's where you're at, and people are either in or out.
Right. So we solidify a lot of the stuff though in our session 0. Then when we're not only just making characters though, we're discussing the type of game we'll be presenting.
We hopefully are.
What themes it might have. What style of play? Is this going to be more of an RP thing? Is this going to be more of a political intrigue? Is it going to be hack and slash?
Is there going to be advancement, or is this like a one-shot kind of a thing? A lot of the like we were talking in our previous system spotlight, there's 2 ways to play things. You've got the adventure mode where it's a preset, whether you create your characters or they're handed to you and you're tweaking them, there's no advancement. This is the movie. We're doing this movie and we're done.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. There may be a movie following it up, but this is it. Kind of a thing. And so the game sits in a very tight scope. I'm going to a convention. There's a session. That's it. Kind of a thing. So advancement becomes a huge play on that. And then the thing that is sometimes the hardest to actually get, which is getting feedback.
Oh, yeah. Gathering feedback from players about what type of game they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of times, we walk into our session 0 and go and we just lay it down on the table and just go, this is what I'm running for you. But
unzip the bag, throw out a bunch of guns and say, this is what we're doing today.
Yep. Yep. And I think it's very valuable at this point also to kind of get your feedback from your players on like, well, okay, I was kind of hoping to play a little more hack and slash. Okay, well we can, we can maybe sprinkle some more combat in there. If you're okay with doing stretches of RP between the combat, then
Yeah.
And
I think your opening gambit of story, which is where you're, beyond your session 0, your milk run, maybe even like your brevity runs where you're getting used to the players.
Yep.
You're introducing the character to the story.
Yes.
You're building investment. This is the town that they're defending, that they live in, that establishes things or gets them to know all the players involved in the process. Those kinds of moments can often be some of the best information gathering. I know early for me, you see it all the time when you come by here, and not everybody else gets to see it, but I have sticky notes that wrap around my monitor, usually right after a game, because I'm making quick notes during the game as people are telling me things.
It's true.
And
those scenes where like you see a post-apocalyptic and like nature has already retaken it and vines are just covering everything. Now, if those vines are Post-it notes, that's what his office looks like.
It does do that, and it's just because I like taking quick notes, but they're not always connected.
Yeah, yeah.
And it helps me to be able to say, like, oh, my player just said this. I'm going to make a quick note about this because it's something I should really keep track of for later on.
Absolutely.
But it took a long time to get my brain trained to do that. So.
Your players, and we'll get a little bit more into this later, but your players are your best. Like, if just listening to your players, they will tell you what their expectations are, whether they tell you these are my expectations or not. You know?
Right.
So, and there's a certain amount of work the room as well. Or reading the room, I should say, during your session 0. If you're giving your sales pitch and you're watching your players' eyes glaze over and go like, oh, yeah, okay. Maybe that's not the enthusiastic consent you're looking for,
Right.
And so there's. They may be telling you a lot about their expectations just in how they react to, like, just laying down your session 0 and stuff like that,
Yeah, and I think within those first sessions, some of the times, I've seen the DMs, and I agree with Knox in live chat, is that there's a lot of times when DMs, I would say early DMs or very militant DMs who are saying, this is the way the story is going, love it or leave it.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless of how you want to play the game, there are sometimes 3, 2, 7, maybe more, other opinions at that table of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to be present.
Yeah.
And part of, and that means compromise.
Yes.
It's cooperative storytelling. Otherwise, go write a book.
Yeah.
Just go write a book.
And the other big thing is that, session 0s are super valuable for laying down the groundwork of those expectations from moment 1, but the conversation does not stop there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is kind of where a lot of this, like, I'm take it or leave it, I'm the DM attitude comes into play, is, you'll have people who, 5-10 game sessions down the road, player will voice a concern and say, hey, this is not as fun for me as I thought it was going to be. And there's a knee-jerk reaction that some storytellers have where they go, well, we discussed this in the session 0. So you have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
You said okay then.
Yeah.
So now it's happening.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that point, but
and like that's
it's an ongoing discussion.
Things change during gameplay.
Always. Especially during story. Some stories can get very deep and players can be like, I was totally into it. But then I talked to my therapist and I might need to back out of the game.
Well, I mean, even aside from that, though,
Yeah.
there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, obviously, triggers are a big thing.
Right.
Like, if your therapist suggests you back out of your D&D game because it's affecting your personal life, that's definitely a thing.
That's
but that's
far
not
end of the spectrum.
But that's not mismanaged expectation.
No.
That's a PTSD trigger.
Right.
And it's very serious, but it's not a mismanaged expectation.
Whereas...
What I'm talking about is stuff like you, the storyteller, might not be providing what you said you would provide.
I think that's accurate. Okay.
During the session 0, I said this is going to be a hack and slashy game, and it's been 4 game sessions. We're still doing nothing but RP.
Or political intrigue.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
And my players are drumming their fingers going like, I thought this was going to be something different, and you're still... Oh, we're getting to the fighting. We're getting to the fighting. But the Duke comes in and says, you're like, okay, God, can we fight the Duke? Like, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. Maybe the players had mistaken expectations. They thought they wanted something. You said, I'm going to run a hack and slashy game. They said, that sounds great. 3 game sessions in, they're bored with combat.
Yeah.
It wasn't as much fun as they thought it was going to be. Or maybe you're presenting it in a way that makes it not fun for them. Maybe they like combat as long as it's story-driven. And you're just giving them raw combat with very little story.
Right, it's not as heroic as they expected it to be, or the fighting is too vicious, and now they'd much rather do it tactically. I know our group kind of negotiated over doing vicious combat for a while.
Yeah.
Or even like you present them tons of loot and they just don't care about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. not only that, but sometimes even in the presentation of the game. Maybe it's your maps, maybe it's your terrain. Things are getting in the way, and they're not even interested in it. It's not important to them.
It's not the story, it's how the story is being told.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Your music is too much, or all the voices are a little too much for them, or too little for them. Like, they're just not engaged.
Yep.
None of the NPCs mean anything to them because they see them for all of 2 minutes before they're either killed or they leave and a new one comes in.
Sure.
All of these things are meant to be kept track of or notes to be made. And communication is the key to all that.
But the point is that things change, and that's okay.
100%.
That is absolutely okay. Like, sometimes this happens, and it looks at a lot of moving parts, a lot of different people involved, and it's not always going to come out the way that you plan it to, and it's not always going to come out the way that your players expect it to.
So what you're saying, Sarah, is it's not you, it's me.
I'm saying it could be any number of things.
But good relationships in gaming is about communication.
Exactly. And you don't want to hold your players accountable for their initial expectations. That you don't do that we discussed this in session 0, so you have to be okay with it. Tabletop RPGs are a bit like getting frisky with somebody.
I kind of love this.
And
I don't want to, but I love this.
This is where Rob said it's going to get NC-17. I swear to God, I'm going to keep it clean. I'm going to keep it very PG-13 here.
I wish you the best.
So tabletop RPGs are a little like getting frisky with somebody, okay? In that they are a collaborative activity where all the people involved ideally wish to make everyone else in the endeavor happy about what is happening, okay? And that involves the input of everybody involved. The expectations should be agreed upon in the beginning. I agree, okay?
Yes.
That's what we call consent. That's also what we call just setting proper expectations. But keep in mind those expectations can change during the experience and frequently do.
We are not on a roller coaster where literally you're in the front car, you've agreed to get on the front car, and there is no getting off till the end of the ride.
Exactly.
That is not the way this is played.
Exactly.
We are not on rails.
So the consent the consent should be continuous and enthusiastic. If your players were into it before, but are no longer into it, that is absolutely valid. You can't force them to be into it by going, well, you agreed 10 sessions ago at the session 0 that you were going to be into it.
That makes you the bad guy. Or bad person.
That makes you the bad person.
That's right.
Telling your players, and getting angry at your players that their expectations have changed does not fix anything. It just makes the other person at the table have bad feelings about what's happening.
And continuing to cause that problem makes it not fun for everyone.
Exactly.
You are not going to, maybe you enjoy pissing off your players. Maybe that's your go-to thing, but that doesn't mean it's cooperative storytelling anymore.
Exactly.
That just makes you being a jerk to people randomly.
So you're like, I'm going to, okay, now it's a combat heavy game. And people are like, well, God, I didn't know it was going to be nothing but combat. Like, this is a little too much combat. I'm not having fun with this anymore. Well, you agreed to a combat-heavy game, so here's another combat encounter.
Or just roll another character.
You're just going to brute force it over. Like, they already said they weren't having fun. Like, what are you doing, you know?
Exactly.
So, I'm sorry. That's where the metaphor ends.
Yes,
but
players versus the storyteller is a style, but it is not we're not talking about that in this.
Rarely good.
Yes.
It's rarely good.
It rarely works out.
Especially when everybody at the table is not agreed to storyteller versus
it's getting hot and combat heavy. That's awesome, Knox. I have to agree. That fits all way too well.
All right. So what do we do then if player expectations are not being met?
We get up and walk away from the table. I'm joking.
Exactly. Stop playing RPGs altogether.
Just burn your books.
Yes.
No. It happens often. You'll see it. Your players will see it. It's gonna happen, and there's literally no way for us to cover everything. But we're gonna say the same thing we've been saying for the last 3 years. Communicate. Just talk between the players and the storyteller. That's it. Just communicate. It doesn't fix, but it definitely makes it easier to get to a resolution for the relationship of the storyteller and the story.
So one of the things I picked up from you Well, we've discussed this before, but in case you haven't listened to 132 other episodes of us, well, I will reiterate it again because it's germane to the discussion. One of the things I picked up from you as a storyteller is the breakdown at the end.
Yeah.
We always do this. We ask the players what their favorite thing was, how I could do something better to improve their experience, and I've started asking, what would you like to see happen next game session?
Yeah, I think that's great.
The Mad Elf, our friend Matthew, asks for a wish and a star.
I do like that.
I like the wish and the star, and that's the star. That's the thing that you liked the most, and the wish of what you wish would have happened differently.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be mechanics. It doesn't have to be against the storyteller. It could be any number of things. It could be the fact that we ordered pizza at the wrong time, or maybe it would be better, if we weren't on the couches and we were at a table instead. Those are little things that make a huge difference and help make things more comfortable.
And when players tell you that they like something, that's them telling you that an expectation would be to have more of that thing. If they tell you that something is making them uncomfortable, or maybe that something could have been done better, or they wish there was less of something, that's them setting an expectation that there will be less of that thing.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not in exactly the words of I expect A, B, C, or D.
Right.
You just have to listen to your players when you communicate with them.
Yeah, and I think another aspect of that is also the fact that during gameplay, making those notes allows you as the storyteller later when you're addressing the players to be like, hey, you made this comment midway through. Can you elaborate on that? Because they're not going to remember 3 hours ago.
Yeah.
They're going to be crappy at that, but you're the one who can take those pauses while they're trying to figure things out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're the storyteller. You can take as much time as you want to continue the story. And honestly, and I'm going to say this, combat is the longest part of the process. Mm-hmm. It gives you plenty of time to make notes.
Oh, absolutely.
And address side things.
Absolutely, it does. The other thing I've greatly encouraged, and I think you've done a bit of this too, is encouraging your players to talk about their plans with you.
Yes.
Including them in a collaborative discussion about okay, well, where are you guys going to head next?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to head to the town of Skingrad? Mm-hmm. Or are you going to continue on to Coral?
Yeah.
Or are you going to continue on to the Imperial City?
Mm-hmm.
And having those discussions about and what are you going to try to do when you do there? What's the plan? Because first off, not only does this help you prepare the stuff for there. So if I know you guys are going to one specific city, I don't need to write the other two yet.
Right.
I don't need to have NPCs prepared for that. That's time that saves me on world building. I only need to build what's in front of you.
Correct. The other thing that I liked about that, if you've got a group that's on the regular and they're used to doing travel and stuff like that, one of the things that you can do is not unlike TV series and movies do, where the protagonist group effectively says, we're going here, because we got to get fuel, and in the background, that this person's going to do this, and this person's going to do this, and this person's going to do because that's what they just said they were going to do. So the next session, you open up with the benign as practically narrative. Mm-hmm. You were able to, you landed, got yourself fueled up, you headed to the bar, had a few good drinks, found out about a couple of events going on that we'll get into. You were able to easily find yourself at the spice dealer who got you a little bit extra than you expected, and you ran into your buddy, and he's going to meet you at the bar that night. So here we are that night sitting down. I'm handing the quests over. You can describe it with the group. And you've just got them into the moment. They're comfortable. They remember where they left off. You've picked right things back up versus going through the benign of the details unless that's necessary.
And on top of that, you've met all of their expectations. They told you flat out they expected all this stuff to happen.
Why not?
They may not, again, have said, I expect A, B, and C.
Right.
But when saying, here's the plan, that's what they expect to happen.
Yep.
You've leaned right into that, and you've handed them the experience they wanted.
You handed them the thing. That was the thing that they talked about in the last game.
Yes, the thing for Cusco's thing.
That's
the
so
thing
tight.
Specifically for Cusco. The other thing too is that when they're discussing their plans and such like that, they can reveal a lot about what their expectations are that way. Mm-hmm. So if they, if you're like, hey guys, what are your thoughts on the fight with the big bad evil guy?
Mm-hmm.
And they go, well, he said a lot of stuff about this trauma and his childhood and stuff like that. Honestly, I think we're just going to try to talk to him, see if we can get through to him, because I think there's a good person underneath there who's just hurt and misunderstood.
Fantastic.
Cool. What they're telling you is, I expect that a role-playing solution will be viable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're like, okay, so he's got this secret lair, right? We're going to infiltrate from the south through the sewers, and we're going to spring all the traps, and we're going to fight his goons. Okay, sounds like they want a hack-and-slash dungeon adventure.
Sounds great.
You know?
Yep.
I expect this is what's going to happen. Cool. So you're going to learn a lot about your players' expectations just from listening, the things they get enthusiastic about, the things that they shy away from.
And it doesn't mean that you have to present it whole cloth to them and give them what they want. If they're expecting to dig through the sewers, and you know that this guy is literally useless, like they're stalking someone who's not important, but for some reason they've got it in their head that this guy's the linchpin on everything, and they ate his red herring hook, line, and sinker. You're still going to present them what they want. You're just going to make it easy for them. And they're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is too easy. He's expecting us. And then finally they get in his room and he's literally in the bath like, excuse me, can I help you?
I'm in the middle of something here, buddy.
Yeah. Like, can I get a robe and a conversation? And sometimes that can throw them off even more because they built themselves up to a point. But you've literally given them the entire scenario that they asked for.
Sure.
And you've walked them through it with the detail that they requested.
And subverting expectations for dramatic value is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get there in a little bit.
We will get there.
But right now we're talking about just giving them the expected thing.
Yeah.
And look, it's not about letting your players dictate your story to you. That's not what we're talking about. It's mostly just finding a way to listen to what they're saying, reading between the lines and saying, this is the type of game that I want to take part in, and seeing what you can do to make your story be told in that way. And that's really it, Sometimes reading the room is the best way. Like, you're not going to necessarily even have conversations with your players all the time where they're going to explicitly spell stuff out to you. First off, not all players are going to be open about their expectations.
Oh, God, no. Most of them won't even talk to you about it.
Yeah, a lot of players are not going to fully understand or be able to articulate their expectations. They may know in a vague sense that they are or are not having fun, but I mean, I've had plenty of breakdown sessions where people are just like, I don't know, this session didn't sit well with me. Can I think about it and come back to you?
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But you might have read a little bit into I've had sessions fall flat because there were too much description. I've had sessions fall flat because the player expectation was that one thing was going to happen and it didn't, and it just sent them into a confusing loop. Or I presented a new NPC that didn't make any sense for why they were showing up. It made sense to me as the storyteller, but didn't make sense to them. So you can read that quickly, and as long as you make your notes about, this fell flat, and you can evaluate it later, or even ask them about it, and they might be like, yeah, I didn't understand why it was there at all. Yeah. And you let them in on a detail that maybe they just forgot about, that never came back up, and they're like, oh, that was that guy? Oh, dude, I would have handled that totally differently. Oh, boy. Don't I have egg on my face kind of a situation. And that happens. Things like that do happen.
Oh, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And, again, sometimes like you may not get that sort of explicit of like, oh, I didn't understand that one specific thing. Sometimes you'll just hear players go, oh, I just thought we were going to do something different. Or, I just thought something or another.
Yeah. Or why can't we? Or why can't I?
Yeah. Isn't this supposed to... Or, when are we going to...
Yeah.
These are expectation statements.
Yep.
And you need to learn to recognize them when a player is telling you, oh, I just thought we were going to be able to break in here.
Yeah.
I expected a heist to be a viable option for resolving this conflict.
Right. Make a note.
Okay, make a note, Player interested in heists. Copy that.
Yep.
So what do you do when your expectations are not going to align with the group, when they don't align with the group?
Well, I mean, not everyone's going to match. Like, literally, person to person at the table, you might have 3 people at the table you're matching the expectations of, and one just totally not at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a thing.
this is always a weird a weird moment. Have you ever had it where you've got your odd player out?
Yes.
Where like you've got 4 players that are severely into your plot, and then you've got one player who's just like meh.
Yeah. It's and what's interesting is sometimes it's the player that I really want to be involved, and they're just not there at all, or I've got the opposite where I have that one person involved and everyone else is just totally floored and out of it. I've lost the room basically.
How did you handle that?
So, switched up the narrative on the next one.
Okay.
Like noted who wasn't involved, switched up so that I could give focus. And bring those other people in so that it takes time to be able to do that switch up and to re-engage, and you have to really be aware. And sometimes, I would say early on in storytelling, it was exceptionally hard to do that, be able to switch those gears. So.
Yeah, exactly. Knox in the Box actually adds in the live chat, I wouldn't have made a blank character if I knew you were going to nerf my spells or abilities like that.
Ooh, yeah, that's a huge one.
That's a huge expectation, especially in D&D.
Yeah, you can make whatever character you want, I don't care. And then when somebody makes a bad character, that DM nerfs you because they don't like the way you're playing it.
Or either they don't like, or they weren't, or they're just not doing the math, accurately on their end.
Yeah.
Like, God, I hate to say it, but like Sean got under my skin a lot early on in our campaign.
I know, I
because
remember.
He knows how to play a bard in some real BS ways.
Oh, 100%.
And he knows all the cruel little loophole spells that just screw over an entire encounter. And I don't think that way. I don't really like, and I'm not saying Sean is power gaming. That's not at all what I was getting. I'm saying he was playing his character very effectively and efficiently.
Yeah.
And I think more narratively. I just think, oh, you're going to fight.
Right.
And it will be dangerous because he does a lot of damage. I don't consider the bard has heat metal and this guy's wearing full plate armor.
I think it was a beautiful way of handling it.
And that trivialized the entire encounter, and you guys killed this boss in like 2 turns. And there's a part of that that's frustrating for me because I had expectations. These are expectations of myself that were not met. And you guys had a great time, but I expected that fight to come out completely differently. Did it matter in the long run? No. But I got salty because my expectations were different. The outcome was fine.
Yeah.
The outcome was absolutely fine.
Everybody had a great time.
Everybody had a great time. My expectations weren't met. I got salty about it. And then I started thinking, well, how do I nerf him in the future? How do I avoid...
How do I get back?
How do I get back? Yeah, how do I stop him from mismanaging my expectations in the future? And I kind of had to step back from that, and think to myself, like, no, I can't be thinking like I got to be a fan of my player. When he screws over an encounter, I got to be like, yeah, dude, and high five him. But that's the weight of mismanaged expectations. And I almost fell into that trap. I almost started nerfing his bard because of that.
It's a natural response to feel that you are losing authority or you're losing respect if you don't have control of the table.
Yes.
That's natural. That's 100% natural. But the challenge is, as a storyteller, to rein yourself in and recognize what you're doing to the game by doing that.
Absolutely.
So
there is, and that I think segues us nicely into the storyteller and player disparity.
Yeah.
Where, if some of your own expectations aren't being met, what do you do? And like I said, there's that urge to kind of crack down if your things aren't being met because, like you said, you feel like your authority is being challenged and stuff like that.
Yep.
Always err on the side of the players having fun.
Yeah.
Always, if you find yourself getting salty about something, consider your players and just be like, look, are they having a good time? Then good, just let it go. It doesn't matter.
Consider the story. Consider the players. Are they enjoying themselves? Then accept it.
Exactly.
Find a way for you to enjoy it with them.
Exactly.
And there are times when you're not going to be able to accept that. There are going to be stories where you've gotten yourself invested far too into them, and you feel like you're grinding against the players because they're not following things. Maybe they're murder hoboing their way through a diplomatic story. And that's not what you want. And they're like, oh, no, we're totally involved in this. And then, like, the next thing you know, they're murdering the next person along the line. You're like, this isn't like, oh, but we're keeping it covered up, so it's very subversive. Like, you're murder hoboing. You're not following the feel of the story, you know?
Yeah.
You're I'm trying to remember the name of it. What's the name of the show where you've got the serial killer who only kills bad people?
Oh, Dexter.
Like, you planned on running NCIS, and instead you end up with players playing it like Dexter. And you're like, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't the expectation I have, but your players are like, but this is so much fun. And you're like, I can't do this. Sometimes it's time to close up the book and be like, okay, I'm going to set this story on the shelf. I can't. Maybe it's for other players. Maybe it's for a different group. Maybe I expected this group to go one way, and I set the expectations, and they just can't because they're not in the mind frame for it.
Sometimes you are telling the greatest story to the absolute wrong group of people.
100%.
Yep. And sometimes you need to recognize that. And honestly, it is okay to walk away from a game. I've done it before.
Yep.
I guarantee the world goes on. It's fine. Sometimes you just need to say, guys, I don't think this game is working out.
Yeah.
We'll play something else.
Yeah. Accept where it's going if you can and adjust. That's another thing. I've more than enough times scrapped my entire plot because the players wanted to do something else. And you know what? It was fun, so I rolled with it. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
And I guarantee you, too, that, like, if you are teetering on that, like, wanting to hang on to the story you've written with a death grip versus what your players are doing that is different from your expectations, it is very rarely ever worth it to hang on to that story with your death grip.
Yep.
Let go. If the players want to go left and you just really want them to go right because you've written that, I would urge you just to let go and let them go left.
You never know where they'll take you.
Exactly.
Or you'll take yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be far better than what you've already written. Or you know what? It might even suck from your perspective. But if your players are having fun, man, like just go with it.
Write something on the side and keep going.
Exactly. See if you can get them back on track later. But just,
So let's take a small step into subverting expectations.
All right.
I don't think it's a good idea for one-shots or short stories or adventures because you don't have enough time to shift gears. You're not going to go from a, plucky thievery group who are busting into houses to horror. Like, that's a bad idea.
Yeah. Dramatic shifts in theme or feel, I think, is definitely something that you should stay away from.
Oh, in general, yeah, definitely.
With some little exceptions. Like, I mean, dramatically shifting the entire game's theme is one thing.
Yep.
Dramatically shifting a scene for drama's sake and then keeping the theme the same, I think is just great.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to throw a Scooby-Doo episode in the middle of your dungeon crawly, grindy quest game, sure, do it. Have fun with it. Let them find a plucky mystery and pull the mask off and find that it was all Mr. McGee who was doing the whole thing, and he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for these meddling adventurers, and then get right back to the story. Whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Exactly.
That's perfectly fine. Those kind of things. But if you're going from something lighter, an intrigue story, to suddenly like a horror story or getting gruesome, like no one's died. Every death has been off screen or people have been, quietly knocked out and they're, they come to later or injured or whatever. And then suddenly you have a room full of bodies that they walk into. Like, that's harsh.
Yeah.
It's even more harsh when they witness it, and if you don't set that expectation, your players may not be prepared. Like, whoa, this isn't the thing I signed up for.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think that the best thing is like, don't overdo it as a garnish, not an entree.
Thank you.
Is that like, well, kind of like your example earlier where you were like, okay, you go through the big bad evil guy's entire lair, and it's this big dungeon crawl extravaganza where you're fighting off his security systems and his minions and whatnot, and you walk in for the final battle and he's in the bath, and he's like, can you just hand me my robe? Like, let's talk about this. That's a subversion of expectations. You haven't robbed the players of their dungeon crawl experience.
Yeah.
You might have robbed them of the boss fight at the end, but it's they still got their combat.
They still got everything they wanted as the play goes.
And they may yet still have their conflict with the big bad evil guy. He's just in the bath right now.
And one of the things that I think really got made by a point was Knox talked about the Mandarin being included. Yeah. I think that was another example of that, where you had one expectation of this is what it is, and then suddenly he's just an actor.
Yeah,
like I'm not even the dude. Like I don't know who the dude is.
It's Ben Kingsley, who's just like, yeah, no, it's just a paid gig.
Yeah. Like, I have the voice, but like I'm just being paid. So and that's the kind of thing that turns players and makes them go, oh, okay, well then what's the truth? Did I make up the truth? Oh no. Like and you start questioning, and that's when you can pick up and slap the plot back into the player's hands again.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. It gives them thing. I think soft shoeing, if you're going to do a direct change, meaning like maybe you're in the midst of an act change, or your players really want to quest after something. They're taking a step off to the side of the plot. The plot's going to be there later, but they're taking a side step because they want to go down this character plot, or they found an item and they're really intrigued on like maybe figuring that out a bit more because they might be able to use it. That's a great time for a theme or a feel shift, and give them something a little different. And then bring them back. Like I think that's a perfect soft shoeing into it, if you will. Yeah. Opening the door, seeing if they even enjoy it, and maybe they just close that door and walk away.
And if you are going to run something really like challenging, don't be afraid to like run it out of game past your players. Be vague about it as much as you can to preserve the I would say the shock value of it. The reveal. Don't spoil it necessarily, but like you were talking about how putting in children as combatants.
Oh yeah, you did a great job of presenting that to us.
Was a thing, and I was basically like, hey guys, I was thinking about adding this as a theme because they're bandits and they're press ganging villagers into service. Is that an X card for anybody if I present children as combatants? And they were like, oh no, that's heavy, but we're okay with it in game.
It makes sense.
It makes sense narratively in game and stuff like that. And so when I presented it, and some of the characters had some very strong reactions to it,
without a doubt,
high initiatives were rolled, arrows were put through chests.
Yeah, I mean it was all there. Like I think. But it also gave you a quick understanding of what we felt was acceptable.
Exactly.
It didn't give permanent consent, but it gave you a glimpse.
Sure.
And that helped, I think, for much further encounters, which you continued on much later, which I thought was great. I think the whole Stargate movie moment you had, where the bad guy had all of the people wrapped around him.
Oh, yeah,
It totally reminded me of Stargate, where like all the children just wrap around Anubis.
Around the Goa'uld, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then he's just like, what are you going to do? Kill them all, kind of a thing?
I'm their god.
Yeah, what's your problem?
You're just going to kill their god in front of them?
Yeah. And it was like, ooh, okay, okay. But that was 100% a trigger for me, and I remembered the scene from the movie, and I watched it in my head, and I was like, oh, that's where we are.
Yep, that's where you are.
Yep.
That's precisely where you are.
Yep. All right.
Wanted to talk a little bit about game systems.
Yes.
Setting their own expectations.
Yeah, I asked you a question before we got into doing this more, or after we were working on the show sheet, and I basically said, like, when has an expectation fallen flat for you, Sarah? Like, was there ever a time where you started in and you had a feel and a theme in mind, and you presented it, and yet it just didn't hit? And you made it perfect, and it pointed us out that system has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I had to think about it a little bit because I was like, oh man, in recent history, have I ever had a game go completely belly up? I had to think probably back to like college days when I was really big into the World of Darkness by White Wolf Games, and playing Vampire the Masquerade. And I think I tried to run a couple of World of Darkness games that didn't last more than 2 or 3 sessions because I wanted to make them all these like huge political intrigue games, and that's kind of how the game is billed. Is a political sniping intrigue game of personal horror. And the moment people looked at their character sheet and said, I have 5 dots in strength, and I have 4 dots in melee, and I
Celerity.
have 3 dots in celerity, which means I can kill half of this room before they can blink.
Yeah.
I'm going to solve my problems that way. And
Yeah.
it goes from being a political tangled web game and turns into Blade.
Yeah, and that's I've almost had all of my all my vampire games, besides a few, turn into more murder sprees. I've had some wonderful roleplay, but so many of them are just people wanting to use all the combat powers, like all of them, and it's the only time that I saw it used very effectively. The storyteller flipped the script and started running it a different way, and that was he saw that everybody wanted to do combat that way, and so he kind of changed it up to be samurai style, where like vampires look at each other, and there's that moment where like 10,000 scenarios run between them, and then one of them is dead. Like nobody else sees it, but just one of them suddenly is dead because that was the one opening.
Yep.
And they knew it.
Yep.
You know, kind of a thing. And it's like, wow, okay. Or they look at each other and they recognize that today is not that day. Have a nice one.
Now, you mentioned Rifts.
Rifts was another one. I always wanted Rifts to have mystery and wonder and discovery, because it always felt like that. Like the world was full of these little things that a group could adventure and find and discover through. And yeah, it was going to be dangerous, and there was going to be beasts and hardships. It was going to be a survival game of exploration, and almost every single time it turned into running and gunning.
Oh yeah,
that's all it was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and
it turned into Mad Max.
I think this is one of the greatest examples of a game system setting its own expectations. Is that yeah, sure, you can talk all you want about how you want a hardcore survival mystery exploration game in this broken world that is Rift, but when your main manual includes things like glitter boys that have like
walking tanks with particle weapons.
Yeah, walking tanks with particle weapons, much better than I was going to say.
Yeah.
And MDC mega damage capacity weapons that like strip armor and literally atomize, human beings.
Like literally there's one of the character classes involves a dude who's basically wearing vehicle armor, carrying a rail gun with a jetpack strapped to his back. Part of the Skull group, and he hunts down psychers. Like that's his ability, is that he basically uses this giant rail gun in high speed to rush and kill psychers.
Yeah.
Like
when that's part of when that's a character class you can choose out of the main book.
Danger Boy, Explosive Danger Boy.
Yeah, exactly. It sets an expectation for how that game is going to be played, and even in whether you have that expectation, you can go through that. And this is one of the main reasons I moved away from D&D as my main game, was because D&D has the same problem.
Right.
Is you've got all these character classes that have all these great ways of dispatching enemies.
Yeah.
And if you do not want to make dispatching enemies and combat the focus of your game, what do?
Political intrigue and D&D do not feel like they go together.
And your players can tell you all they want that they're okay with a political intrigue game. But I guarantee they're all side-eyeing all of those abilities they've got that are great at dispatching enemies.
Yeah.
All those combat actions and cool spells that hit multiple targets and things they can combo together to destroy people in 3 turns. And they're going... And yet, here we are talking.
Yeah. Or worse yet, all your players decide to be bards. So instead of doing combat physically, they're doing combat magically and sneaking some non-somatic spells and rituals in to manipulate is what they're calling it. But it's just combat instead of talking.
Yeah.
Instead of working through things.
Yeah, it is.
So...
All right, you think we've beaten this one into the ground? You want to get to some questions?
I do. I do.
Well, why don't you reach into our grab bag here and grab one of our excellent questions?
All right. Mad Elf, how do you adjust expectations or adapt to change expectations on the fly as a session is in progress and people may voice concerns? I would say changing things on the fly within a session is hard. I think minor things like the way you describe things or how you use media or even presentational modes, I would say, are things you can change on the fly without your players really having any notice of it. But definitely accepting it or not accepting it. I think anything in theme and feel is more along the lines of small adjustments. For instance, if you open up the session, and something happens that throws an X card, whether you see it or it physically hits the table, of like this, I really don't feel like this is something I want to deal with today. There's nothing to say that you can't take a 5-minute break, evaluate, and adjust your descriptions and adjust your presentation.
Yeah,
I think that's the best way to handle something like that, where you're downplaying. I don't think upplaying is something comfortable to do within a session, but downplaying definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I think a lot of it just comes down to flexing your improv chops. If somebody says, "Hey, I don't know if this is, I don't know if I'm having fun with this particular thing. Can we do something differently or whatnot?" If you catch that, or again, like I said, nonverbal. Nonverbal, things are a thing. If you notice someone who's kind of looking uncomfortable, or maybe everybody's on board, but they keep trying to make their character do a different thing, clearly they're not on board with what's currently going on.
Right.
I think a lot of that just comes down to just flexing your improv chops of trying to figure out how you can accommodate that player without derailing whatever you're currently working on.
Right.
I think this is the easiest place to fall into that DM versus player mentality, though, and get salty about it.
Yep, definitely.
Because, why isn't this person just on board? Well, they should be on board,
Yep.
How do I punish them for that? Well, don't punish them. They just want something different.
Yep.
Can you find a way to give it to them? And, up to and including end your session early.
Yeah, I think that's a 100% valid thing to do.
Take a break and think about it. Cool. If you need to say, you know what, guys, it's already 5 p.m. We started playing at noon. Let's just end early tonight. Let's just enjoy the rest of our Saturday, and we'll get back to this next game session. So give me some time to think about how to handle this.
Yeah,
I've had to do that a few times. So.
Grab one.
All right. So Ogdenme asks, how often do you check in with the players and gauge their expectations and game balance desires? Do you do so as a group or individually? Does it need to be formal? Okay, we're going to revisit session 0, or do you do so informally?
I think I think a check-in like that is only necessary when you at that level, when we check in at the end of every session.
Yeah.
I think that's a natural check-in. But I think if you're talking about rechecking back to expectations, I think it's when there's an uncomfortable edge. Like whether you're recognizing it out of one of the players or several of the players or yourself. Like, hey guys, we talked about in session 0 that this was going to be a little bit more heroic. And you guys are kind of running around doing murder spree. Is this kind of where we're shifting to?
Yeah, after you guys tortured the town guard, I started thinking a little bit about where the story was going.
Yeah, it felt a little darker. Like, is that where you want to lean? Is that direction we're kind of taking this? That you guys are not so much heroes, but anti-villains,
Yeah. I think, are you talking about how often do you do this? How often do you do this group or individually? Does it need to be formal or informal? I think all of the above. Like I said, like you said, we check in after every game. We do a breakdown there. We talk about our likes and dislikes and our expectations moving forward. I like listening to your planning sessions.
Yeah.
So that I know that I'm planning the thing in front of you, and it also tells me what you expect as far as a resolution to the plot goes. And between major chapter breaks, I like to have a little session 0 sort of, a session 0 revisit, just to kind of see like, okay, we're at a natural break point in our game.
How are we doing? Yeah.
You just beat the big bad evil guy of this chapter,
right? And
we're obviously going to continue the story. Where do you want to go from here? What are your expectations for the story moving forward?
What's been enjoyable? What hasn't?
Yeah.
On a more broad scope. Because sometimes it's like, this system stinks. I'm not enjoying it. Or I'm not enjoying my character like I used to.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bit of that. There is, I expected, we've been doing this globe-trotting adventure following some big bad evil guy, and we've been all devoted as a group to doing that. But, like, my character has individual goals. Can we have some time to explore my story or explore such and such a, other's story? Because that's been really on the back burner,
Yeah, I mean, I would have been perfectly fine with you doing a series of 1 or 2 session one-shots to do backstories between Act 1 and Act 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
And follow-ups. I think that would have been totally kind of neat.
That's kind of, I was prepared to do that.
Yeah.
But 5 out of my 6 players said they were okay with just following your story.
Yep, which works out.
So I said, okay, fine. You guys are going to get several sessions of his story, and then we're going to see that resolved, and then we'll get back to doing the main plot.
Yep. With my 7th Sea story, I literally gave you guys a full questionnaire asking which plot line you wanted to follow.
You did. Straw poll and everything.
Yep, I did everything. I was just like, hey, you guys all seem to want to follow the story. Let's follow this story next.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
go from there. Yeah.
So I think the answer to your question, Agami, is all of the above.
Yeah.
It should be a continuous thing. When it feels necessary, it should be a formal thing.
Mm-hmm.
You should listen to your entire group, but if you also feel you need to speak to a specific character or a specific player about something that's a concern, or even just to get their feedback on, like, hey, what would you think of me doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure.
Perfect. All of the above. Communication's key. More communication, the better.
Yep. All right. Knox says, or asks, my question is about when there are multiple players at the table with very diverse expectations and playing styles. I know most games can accommodate all these types, but I was wondering more about the actual methods and get them all on the same page. Would a small reward/punishment system be key? Do you have a favorite trick? Honestly, I would say with player expectations and having them meet and then using a reward system is not necessarily... I think they're not a follow-through. I don't think that those come together. Because a player expecting that they're going to get combat and then they're happy to get combat, you've given them their gift. Whereas if you have another player who isn't interested in combat at all and literally their character hides during combat, right? So they're not involved in the combat scene at all. They're literally hiding off to one side and doing nothing but like, oh God, don't get hurt, kind of a thing. And then at the end of that, you're like, okay, well, you braved it, so here's a drama die or here's a Benny or something. I don't think that that's great. I think they're role-playing, and I think that's wonderful that they're role-playing their character, and you can highlight the fact that they're role-playing their character. But if you go to that player and say, hey, why weren't you involved in combat? Your character has the ability, and they're like, I don't like combat at all. I find the numbers challenging, and it just bothers me every time we get involved in it.
Yeah.
That's like, we got into D&D, and it's a tactical combat game. The expectation is that it's tactical combat. Like, were you aware of that? Oh yeah, but I'm not involved in those, and I don't want to be. So my character literally is a pacifist, and I hide. Okay, well, you're not going to gift them or benefit them in any way, but if they're still being involved in role playing and stuff, they're still part of the story.
Yeah,
I don't see a problem with that.
God, my answer to this question is so manifold. Like, there's a lot going on in this question, and then it's not to say that it's a bad question.
No, I think it's very valid.
It's a super valid question. I just think there's a lot of, each sentence of this question requires a separate response, and I'm not going to be able to give a blanket answer.
I 100% agree.
All right, so if you've got a table with vastly diverse gaming styles
and expectations,
I think right there already you've kind of messed up as a storyteller.
Yes, you've brought a challenge to the table with no way to resolve it.
Because none of those, you've got your combat twink and you've got your heavy role player at the table. Neither of those are going to be satisfied. The combat twink is going to be bored when people are talking, and the role player is going to be bored when people are fighting.
Right.
And so I think step one of this, even before you get your session 0, and we mentioned this earlier, when you're doing kind of your sales pitch to your friends, is curating your gaming group.
Yeah.
Now, some people don't have the same luxury, and I understand this. I'm a bit privileged to have such great role players around me and such like that. But if you have the capability of curating your gaming group a little bit and seeing, like, when we talked about, like, Alien, the Alien RPG.
Right.
It's one of the greatest systems I've ever seen that I will never run. And the reason I'll never run that is because I know none of my friends like to play horror. Or if they do, I might be able to get them for a one-shot, period.
Right.
Period.
Right.
But that's, again, because I know that they don't enjoy that type of story. So if I'm already sitting a player down to a game that is not going to be something that they're going to enjoy, then I've already kind of messed up. You know? And so if you bring a diverse group like that, someone at your table is going to be unhappy at any given time. Unless they're flexible enough that they don't really have a problem with it, you know?
Right. And we've gone over, like, your gaming group. We've talked about it. I'm actually trying to look for...
the episode number?
The episode number on it.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it in Gaming Group Etiquette, which we did twice. But I know we had one specifically about, like, curating groups. And I'm trying to dig for it, but dude, we have way too many damn episodes, and that's the whole problem with our show.
Well, that's okay. I'm not done yet, so
by all means, continue.
You just keep looking while I keep rambling.
Keep going. Keep going.
So the second part of your question here is wondering more about actual methods to get them on the same page. Would a small reward punishment system be the key? And do you have a favorite trick? So getting everybody on the same page with regards to how to play your game is it's an interesting game theory topic, in that you need to kind of teach players how you want your game to be played, if that's a thing. If you have set the expectation that you're not going to run a combat heavy game, and somebody keeps trying to initiate combat, I don't like punishment systems because I don't like negative reinforcement.
I agree.
Especially in a gaming environment where the ideal is everybody's there to have fun. To me, if you're using punishment, you are just trying to tell someone their fun is wrong and slap them for it, and that's not fun for anybody involved, especially the person being slapped. So for me, it's mostly about rewards. Someone wants to initiate combat. You just kind of either get it out of the way or you blunt it to the side and you minimize it. But if somebody wants to talk, show that that's effective. And it's more about a positive reinforcement thing to keep people on track. You're not necessarily punishing the person by not giving them a full complicated combat scene. You're just not elaborating. You're embellishing. What's the word I'm looking for? You're just not leaning into it. Basically, giving the full combat treatment. Like, okay. The couple rounds of combat, you hit the guy, he dies, whatever. Anyways, and you continue with the story. That's what the best I would do. But at the same time, though, never use an in-game solution for an out-of-game problem.
Ding, ding, ding.
And that's the main thing. Like, you can do little things in-game to encourage certain playstyles in your game, but mostly if you've got a combat twink that's constantly trying to destroy things in his path because every problem was a nail and he's got a shiny hammer, take him aside and be like, dude, this isn't a combat game. Just, maybe we can reset your expectations here, but this is not the type of game that I was planning on running. And it feels like you have a different expectation of what the game is going to do here. So
exactly, and that's I was going to literally say, don't bring an in-game solution to an out-of-game problem.
Yeah.
But if you've got successful players who are doing successful things, like we've talked in the past, rewarding roleplay is great.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's a wonderful thing. I mean,
sure.
Yeah, we're not playing Monopoly. Like, you don't have to reward people in Monopoly for playing Monopoly. You reward people in role-playing because they're role-playing.
Yeah, exactly.
They're leaning into the game.
And that, I think, too, is like, it's as long as everybody's having fun, I don't think any of this matters.
No.
Really.
No.
Like, you don't have to be like, well, this isn't a combat-heavy game, and then suddenly, like, if combat breaks out, you don't have to freak out. If combat breaks out and everybody's like, yeah, combat just broke out. Okay, clearly the players like combat. Let's do it, you know?
So, just to go back, I think it was episode 68.
68
that we discussed how to bring a game to new game to a table, and in there we described...
Do you realize that was over a year ago?
Do you realize what number we're on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I know it was over a year ago,
Yeah.
because I subtracted 52 from it, and it wasn't 68.
Exactly.
Jeez,
No,
Pete.
dude, we've been doing this a long time. Speaking of which, now I'm going to jump off from questions before we close things up. Sarah, you brought up the end of last session after we were done recording that somehow we found out we have listeners in Ireland.
Oh, yeah, I saw there was an interaction on Twitter where somebody gave us a shout out, and they said that if anybody asks about good like gaming podcasts or like somebody said they were getting into
Sure.
storytelling, DMing,
Yeah.
and was looking for good sources for learning how to do that, and they were like, hey, definitely you got to listen to this one, and Storyteller Conclave. They're always, in my top 3.
I am sorry at the top of the show we did not shout out. I will happily say that we are happy to have listeners all over the world. I see listings.
Shout out to Cork.
Yeah, why not? Like, that's
Right?
fantastic. We appreciate it. Please jump in our Discord or hit us up on Twitter or on Facebook if you're still using that. I don't even know, or Meta, or I don't even know what it is anymore. We'll find something new soon enough. But we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be able to give shout outs to you. We'd love to get your questions and find out what the difference is. Different cultures have so many different questions. I found that out talking to some gamers in Germany, just the play styles, the radical difference in storytelling and play styles. And it's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to hear.
Absolutely.
So please hunt us down a little bit. I'm going to try and get our show ended here. I had to pause the background, but I'll get things rolling.
So next week's topic, we are going to be talking about the all often forgotten like animal companions and pets and such like that, the followers and whatnot, and how best to incorporate those into our stories.
Yeah, I know that we'd kind of addressed whether or not we were going to do just animals or not, but I think we need to talk about companions.
I think we need to talk about companions too. So.
And I'm gonna try and bring it back to, because I remember the day that someone told me that, like, as a paladin you gained companions back in the old rules, and I was like, okay,
Followers.
that's really cool concept of followers, but then I was like, oh, that's got to be a nightmare.
Oh, it absolutely is. But you will have to wait for next week. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And like we said earlier, join us up on our Discord. You can find the link to that up on our Twitter, as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members who assist us every single month in keeping this up, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, and Hulavu. Every month, you guys help us so much with that. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. I highly recommend you go up and check him out. He constantly puts out new stuff. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is by Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out, as always, to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and
Thank you
supporting
very
us over
much.
the years. All of our friends who sat with us at our tables to give us all these great stories and experiences to share with you, our listeners, and you, our listeners.
We love you guys.
We love you so much.
Good night.